and welcome to CNBC TV 18. I'm Malvika and I'm in Washington, D.C. and I have with me Finance Minister Mr. Jaitley. Mr. Jaitley, welcome to CNBC TV 18. My first question to you is, and I would like to quote you, you've said that India needs to build such firewalls around its own economy that the impact of global developments can be minimized. What is your assessment of the Indian economy in the context of the world?
You see, this is the third year in a row that I've been attending the bank and the fund meetings. And this time round we had the BRICS, we had G20, we had Commonwealth, we had the World Bank, we had the IMF. And I go back with a clear impression that people are speaking in terms of generalities how to address the current global situation.
Right.
So we must use all tools which are fiscal tools, monetary tools. We must go in for structural reforms. But when it comes to specifics, there are no specific global responses.
Right.
How does growth return to the world? There is no specific answer. And therefore, when I made this statement, what I had at the back of my mind was that at least in the short term, we have to live in an environment of global slowdown, where the world growth is not going to be very supportive.
Right.
Now, in a supportive environment, for example, between the years 2004 to 2008, there was a boom period. And therefore, during the boom period, every economy in the world did well. Now, but in an unsupportive environment, we must learn to protect ourselves and grow. And therefore, under the present circumstances, our domestic investments, attracting foreign direct investments, creating infrastructure, investing in social sectors, investing in rural India, going ahead with all kinds of structural reforms, trying to make India one of the more attractive destinations in the world. And that's a policy we've followed in the last 2 to 3 years. And that's probably one of the reasons that we've been able to maintain a growth of about 7.5% in the last 2 years. Now, global events, if it's a currency devaluation in China, if there is a Fed rate hike in the US, or there is a Brexit, now these will have impacts on markets, these will have impacts on currencies. But the kind of domestic policies that you follow, you try and minimize the impact of that. That the impact lasts for a day or two, and thereafter the resilience that your economy itself shows, that you go on with business as usual. And therefore that's the intention when I made this statement.
But are there any particular steps that the government has already started to initiate in that direction?
You see, steps are that you make India one of the better places in the world for Indian industries and for global investors to do business in. Now, once there is a lot of investment, there's a lot of economic activity, of course the impact of this is then generally felt. The revenues go up, your ability to spend on social sectors and infrastructure itself increases. Therefore, your responses today have to be based on the premise that there is no boom in the world.
Right.
The world has slowed down. International trade is therefore going to be slow. Exports are not going to be what they were 5 years ago. Now, take that as a given and then plan yourself that you are still able to maintain a reasonable level of growth, notwithstanding and beholds these factors.
But is it possible to allow the rupee to slightly devalue, particularly to aid exports?
You see, our consistent policy has been that rupee must survive on its own strength. And therefore, today you have a rupee which is range-bound. And in a range-bound rupee, in fact, interventions to save the rupee have been by far very few or almost negligible. And therefore, rupee moves on its own strength. And I think the policy of the government is at the present circumstances to allow it to do that. Because if we allow it to devalue a lot, then your other adverse impacts like higher oil prices, etc., all those impacts will then also be felt.
Well, you've been meeting a whole host of investors. Are there any concerns that they have raised? I interviewed the DEA secretary, the SBI chairman this morning, and they've all said that investors are very buoyant about the Indian economy.
You see, the impact of all the decisions which we've taken are now being felt. The Canadian pension funds told me that as a result of our FDI policy in the last 2 years, they've invested 12 billion in India. And they're looking to invest more. Now, this is one of the impacts of these unconventional monetary policies, where interest rates have become 0.25% or zero or negative in some cases. So where will you get the Indian kind of returns in those economies? As a result of which each one of them is buoyant about India. They had one legitimate apprehension about India, that our appetite to reform was always in question.
Right.
And I think with the kind of consistency India has shown, we've adequately responded to that.
What about the issue of FDI and e-commerce? Do you favor...
Well, I think the Commerce Ministry is the appropriate department which is dealing with it.
But about the financial implications?
They are formulating their proposals. And I think once the Commerce Department discusses with us, it's only then that I will give a response. I don't want to speak out of turn.